no case pending before it for anybody to respond to. Okay? Now, unless the speaker's lawyers believed that the case they were sending to the Supreme Court was frivolous, had no merit, and so on, how could they have filed responses to a matter that they thought had been irregularly brought before the Supreme Court? So I think that the lawyers of the speaker acted properly and demanded an extension of time to enable them to file, their responses and so on. And yet the Chief Justice was so angry that at one point she actually asked lawyer Sorry whether they should go ahead without him. And I was sitting at home saying, I'm a layman, but this is horrifying. I'm shocked. I cannot understand, what is happening. There's a certain argument which ultimately the Supreme Court may have to decide, okay, on which argument is right and which argument is wrong and so on. That is the prerogative of the Supreme Court. It's not the prerogative of people like me and so on. But you see, ordinary people like me, who have no law certificates, who have no experience worthy of membership of the Superior Court and so on, have something which is simply called logic, the capacity to apply logic. And nothing stops us from applying our logic. Listen, let's take the case of Cynthia Morrison, Member of Parliament, who went to Member of Parliament on the ticket of the New Patriotic Party. Okay. Now she says that I cannot contest elections on the ticket of the New Patriotic Party and I'm going independent. By extension of logic, she's saying that she's no longer loyal to the New Patriotic Party and she's no longer going to push the agenda of the New Patriotic Party. Now, very clever people then say that, that would apply to the next parliament and not this parliament. Very clever people, okay? Now, bless. How is it possible to have divided loyalty? Today, as we speak, she has no confidence in the New Patriotic Party. Today, as we speak, the constitution of the New Patriotic Party makes it clear that she's no longer a member of the New Patriotic Party. So this argument about, at the end of the last elections, the NDC had 137 seats and the NPP had 137 seats. So we had a hung parliament. But there was one independent candidate. So the matter was referred to the speaker for a ruling as to whether or not we can have a majority caucus and a minority caucus. And I remember very clearly the speaker giving a decision which says that there are no caucuses anymore and that there's a majority group and a minority group. So where from this majority caucus and minority caucus that the Supreme Court referred to yesterday? I cannot believe it. Okay. Now, Massa, it's important because if you look at Article 97, H and G of the 19th Constitution, it is clear that it does not allow crossing carpet in Parliament. That the independent candidate could not have become a member of the NPP caucus because it would have implied that he had crossed carpet and therefore would have had to lose his seat for a by-election to be conducted in his constituency. So the speaker very cleverly declared the existence of a majority group and a minority group. You understand? Now, I disagree with the speaker. I disagree with the speaker on grounds that the standing orders of Parliament envisages a situation where there always has to be a majority and a minority. The reality after the last elections suggests that there wasn't no majority and there was no minority. So what needed to be done was a recrafting of the of the standing orders of Parliament to fit this new situation. Now, either because of laziness or because of the will to cling to tradition and so on, we still maintain this position of majority and minority, and found a very clever, perhaps disingenuous way of declaring one side a minority group, and the other side majority group. That is where this problem is coming from. You understand? That is where this problem is coming from. Because if you have an independent candidate in Parliament who declares that for all times, for the 4-year life of Parliament, he will be aligned to a particular party, Massa, directly, not indirectly, he has crossed carpet. And we allowed that to happen in flagrant violation of Article 97, H and G. In flagrant violation. Now, yesterday, the Supreme Court also came up with some decision which I found interesting. The Supreme Court says that it has appellate jurisdiction over all judicial cases. Now, this is interesting. Because if you go back, I recall that the Supreme Court itself decided that if you go to the Constitution, the Constitution says that election disputes ought to be handled by the High Court. And that aggrieved parties who are not happy with decisions of the High Court can appeal to the Court of Appeal. And ended there. By the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution, the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that because the Supreme Court was not directly mentioned as an appellate body, appeals about election disputes ends at the Court of Appeal. This is a Supreme Court decision. Of course, they say that the Supreme Court is not bound by decisions of other panels and that you can change them and so on. So maybe they are right. But it's interesting that one panel of the Supreme Court decided that appellate jurisdiction over matters of election disputes and so on ends at the Court of Appeal. And another panel, headed by the current Chief Justice, decides that no, it doesn't end there, it actually ends at the Supreme Court. That's interesting. It's for lawyers and people who know better, to educate. One thing which was very striking yesterday was also the decision that one of the judges that the Speaker's lawyers were asking to recuse himself would not do so because he has been approved by Parliament. And I'm wondering, how does parliamentary approval cure the likelihood of bias? Because there's no person in the world, including myself, who doesn't have a bias. That bias is not cured by parliamentary approval.